All right, 2 Samuel 6. Let's call this one regifting part 3 because we have already looked at least two instances in which someone brought a gift to David that he really didn't want, and he regifted it to them in some very surprising ways. One, the young Amalekite who claimed credit or took credit for killing Saul was regifted with having his own life taken when he didn't understand how seriously David took the statement, "Do not touch God's anointed." Likewise, when two of Ishbosheth, Saul's sons, servants, thought that they would curry favor with David by bringing Ishbosheth's head, likewise, he gave them the same regifting that he gave the Amalekite. But we're going to see in this way how it is not simply the enemies of God who have to worry about having their gifts regifted, but even the servants of God. David, being recognized as a man after God's own heart, is going to have to worry about the same thing. When we saw on the upside in the last chapter, he did not make too much of past success like the Jebusites had and others had before them, but he understood how it was important to consult God at every step of making important decisions. In this chapter, however, we're going to see the way in which it's important to consult God even in the decisions that don't seem all that significant, when they're going to have a great joy in this chapter as they recover the Ark of the Covenant and they bring it home. But in the course of bringing it home, they're going to neglect the way in which God said that it should be carried. And they're going to honor it by bringing it on a new cart, but they're not going to carry it by its poles. And as it hits bumps along the road, it's going to potentially tumble. And Uzzah is going to step up to do a very kind thing, but he's going to do it the wrong way as he puts his hand on the ark in a way that's been forbidden by God. And God's going to strike him down. David's going to be angry, and he's going to wonder, how can I get this done? And many times in our frustration, sometimes it comes along the lines of a famous passage that says, when a man's choices bring his way to ruin, his heart rages against the Lord. And even David here seems to be going into the kind of rage from a man whose way has been brought to ruin by making the mistakes of overlooking the important details of things that God has asked him to do. And so even though David gets it, that in the important decisions, it's important to check with God at every turn, he forgets that in the details, and it costs Uzzah his life. But as with God, redemption is a huge part of the ultimate story, the big story of the word, and even the small stories. And even in this chapter, it ends in joy. Even though they have to mourn Uzzah, God gives them a second chance, blessing the household that is able to keep the ark consistent with the way he's asked them to do it. And after David sees that household blessed, he's once again encouraged to go back to the business of trying to get God's will done his way. And he's going to succeed in doing that until he gets home, which is going to lead us into another lesson. After we've won battles external, sometimes we will come home to more drama than we care to. And that's exactly what's going to happen to David here, as his wife is going to see him celebrating, finally getting it right with the ark. And she's going to be embarrassed by the display that she seems to think is beneath the dignity of a king. And that's going to set David off, understanding for the last time why that whole concept of regifting is important. Because as we saw with Nabal, sometimes it's not so much giving a person a gift that is unfit for their needs or their interest. Sometimes it's simply not keeping track or being aware of the level of stress that a person has been under. And then the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back can set off a reaction that is completely unexpected. And in this case, it's not clear that David actually responds to Michal, but what we're going to see at the end of the chapter is possibly another intervention from God when it reads, "And Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no child to the day of her death." And so there are times, once again, like we said, that the response of the individual who's been offended is nothing compared to the response that we might see from God. And so it's important to understand whether we're giving gifts or simply making responses to individuals, who they are and what they actually need in the circumstance, once again, before we presume that either the gift we're giving or the response we're giving is actually appropriate, which is why we often say God's best to you as you go forward in him. God willing, not only taking the time to understand the people with whom we're interacting, but more importantly, understanding the counsel that God is trying to give us as to how we can more effectively deal with not only the people, but the situations around us.